Ally's on, right? Okay. All right. I would like to call to order this special meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, February 13th, 2024 at 6:32 p.m. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. One member of this public body or other staff is present at the location to ensure the public participate if desired. Please note that while we strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or if the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email at selectboard@hartford-bt.org. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to a time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by a roll call vote in accordance with the law. As required by the open meeting law, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance of all members participating in the meeting, and have those members attending remotely identify themselves to ensure that they can hear and be heard throughout the meeting. Lanny?
As is always the case, I am here.
Rocket? Ally?
I'm here and I can hear and see you.
Okay, Mary?
Here.
Dan is not present. Kim?
Present.
And I am present. All right, our first order today is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us this evening?
I'll do that.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lanny.
Thank you for the honor.
Okay, order of agenda. I don't see any changes. So our first item will be public comments. We'll start with people in the room and then go to those who are joining us on Zoom. If you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone, identify yourself and your town or village of residence. You'll have 5 minutes to speak and no personal attacks. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, David Briggs from White River Junction, and I'm here continuing my chapters of information regarding the plans for the Gates block and the Coolidge block in downtown White River. A little bit of background, there's some redundancy here because I find that the more I tell these factoids out to people, the more confusing it can become. So I'm trying to overcome that. The argument for justifying the removal and replacement of a historic building documented as contributing to a historic district by the National Trust was developed on the premise that the companion building, the Gates Briggs building, 1890, be committed to preservation, and the Coolidge block be committed to the preservation of the prominence and the dignity as a centerpiece building in the White River Junction downtown district. The initial vision for redevelopment has been to result in a building that would have a larger footprint and to stand taller in order to bring the economic power required to ensure the feasibility of the project. The concept was comprised of Main Street commercial, including potentially a hotel lobby, an event center, hotel rooms and/or housing on the upper levels, and parking underground. The process leading to this stage has presented the following summary issues. Underground parking would be a public sector aspect in terms of ownership and operation, and the cost must be assumed to move beyond the ability of the private sector. Housing would be a public-private mixed workforce and primary homes. Main Street level first floor would be privately owned and operated. The overall project would be a collaboration of public and private communities. The initiator, which at this point is Northern Hospitality Limited Partnership, which I'm the general partner, is choosing to merge its interest with the resulting new owners, public and private, as the project proceeds. And as I've said to you, I'm highly motivated to have that happen sooner than later. The parking level is seen as a general benefit and support to the entire downtown. The Main Street functions must be a continuation and an improvement to the viability of the central business district. And I say that because Main Street functions can be pretty mundane and not so much complete. I'm standing up for that. The housing is a compelling addition to the Upper Valley, both in terms of current needs and the needs of the near-term future. The location of the project is prime real estate on the bus line and proven to be a center of commercial, cultural, and social activity, all in a pedestrian district established since 1848 and steadily transformed since 1980 from an industrial economy to now a creative economy. The stakeholders confirmed the potential to date are the Hartford Development Corporation, which I can see an expanded role, Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission, the State of Vermont Agency of Development and Community Affairs, Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, the Preservation Trust of Vermont, Evernorth, Twin Pines Housing, the Town of Hartford, Advanced Transit, HCRS, Listen, Cover, The Haven, Retailers and Eateries, Northern Stage, the Briggs Opera House and Center for Parking Studies. The main floor commercial is envisioned in a highest and best use vision as an event center. Artisan tenants, such as we already have and have incubated over the last 20 years, and a medical service portal. I'm in discussions with DHMC, ATD, Mount Scotland Rehab Center as potential users of services in downtown Hartford. In summary, this project is historic in its nature, can only be done correctly once. The timing is deemed to be right for all stakeholders. The current coalition is forming and will reflect the impressive growth and expansion of the region that we all know has come to be understood as the Upper Valley. I hope to be back before you on your agenda at the next meeting with a more substantial presentation and images.
Thank you, Dave.
Questions, comments, I'd be happy to field.
Great. I've listened to a lot of these that you presented, David. And biggest thing I guess struck me tonight is that you've talked about a town parking garage. Okay. And then you talk about shops, retail shops, and you talk about apartment buildings. Okay. If it's a town parking structure that sits atop the land, who is the owner of the land?
Ultimately, you mean?
Yes.
I guess that's going to be worked out.
So herein, I guess, is the consideration, if the parking garage is a town property, it doesn't, as a property, how would taxes be paid on that property because the town owns it?
Well, I guess I would say respectfully that the notion of tiered owners on a given piece of land has nothing to do with it.
I understand, but generally speaking, that's someone who owns that property that pays rent to that rent's paid out to everybody. So my question is, because it's a town, it would be a town-owned property, how would the town reap the benefits of any taxes for property?
It sounds like these are good questions for when we actually have.
I would love to be able to have that come back.
Well, a major driver for me with my entrepreneurial hat on is that this doesn't cost the town money.
I understand, but if you could come back to us and address that question, I would really love to have some sort of feedback on that.
Put that on my list. Be happy to do that.
Yeah, I would really love to have some sort of understanding of where that would
I
come
might
into play.
add that you're all invited one by one or whatever to access me off duty when I need to.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it. Any other public comment in the room? Please come up and identify yourself and town or village of residence.
Hi, Marie Alvin, White River.
Hi, Marie.
I'm here. Hi, good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm here to just go over a few things at the Wilder Park and Ride and to see what's where we are at. First of all, I want to send out my grateful thanks to John and Brian, who came personally to the Park and Ride and walked over the issues with a couple of the neighbors out there. It meant a lot to us, and we were impressed at your efforts to reach out to us. So thank you for that. I also wanted to send out a note of appreciation to Gail, who, when she first took over as her role, she dove right in to rectify the problem at the Park and Ride. She set up an area where the cars were going to be towed and the charges that were going to be made, and set up a towing company who was willing to come and do the work. So that is something to commend her on. And she has witnessed a lot of complaints, needles, trash, etc. at this park and ride. And it was suggested at one time to close it down. There's plenty of evidence that this is a continuous problem up there. It's been going on since 2010, whether you can see it or not. I'm not going to sit back and watch this park and ride become a drug dealing, a drug hangout for homeless and a camping area. That's not what it's for. Nor is it an overflow parking lot for the Haven or Twin Pines. They have done measurable studies and assured us all that they have plenty of parking at those two organizations. So neither of their guests can go over there and hang out either. It's not a hangout, is what's happening. I've seen this Hartford Avenue, the Haven, go from a dry campus, no drugs, with a family shelter, to now drug infested and singles walking around everywhere. Hopefully the Haven will go back to a dry campus. Not everybody in the whole world's on drugs. I know it's a problem, but we need to have a place for drug-free, especially when there are children involved. Also, Gail and John have both worked with the new chief, who I appreciate his efforts, and the Hartford Police Department for controlling and enforcing the guidelines. This has been the quietest winter I have seen up there in that park and ride for some time. So the patrolling and the presence does in fact work. Our neighborhood, one person in the neighborhood even noticed she saw a patrol car actually drive into the park and ride at night, using its flashlight to check out the cars. Great job, love it. Thank you very much. Patrolling and reinforcement works. This isn't, there isn't anybody who is more sick and tired of this, of all this, than me. Believe me, it hasn't been easy. Winters are not usually the problem up there at the park and ride. It's coming into spring, into summer, and you know, as it all goes on. And I'm hoping we can set up some sort of policies and procedures so that we don't have to constantly revisit and complain about these continuing issues that go on up there. I mean, we don't like complaining any more than police want us to be complaining to them about it. Patrolling and reinforcement. If the people know they are going to be watched, they're not going to be hanging out there and doing drugs or dealing or whatever. If the policies are enforced, there's no camping. There won't be any camping, no overnight sleeping, because it's right on the rules there. This is not a Haven or Twin Pines overflow hangout. Some of the questions is how to deter people from hanging out there and going behind the fence. They had asked to put up a fence. There was some discussion that the fence didn't seem like they didn't think it was a good idea. DPW didn't think it was a good idea, and John was kind of iffy about that. That still remains to be seen. If you want to pursue, actually, if it's constantly enforced, if the police are constantly there patrolling and enforcing, they will be catching that. So it won't ever be a problem. And so in order to come up with policies and procedures, all of the information that Gail had put together regarding towing and the company and the cost should all be documented, so we have it, just in case that ever happens again. Will it happen again? Probably not if it's enforced. Yeah, so there was the fencing, and then there was also the lighting, which it's very dark over there. Whether that will work or not, I don't know. Again, if police are going in there, looking with their flashlights in cars that are hanging out there at night, they're checking it. We don't need lights. You know, it's all about enforcing what the rules are there. I asked for a camera. Again, if there's enforcement, people know, the town knows, don't hang out at the park and ride to do your drug deals and hang up there and smoke a joint, or the needles that were found, the numerous needles that were found there this fall. Won't happen. And I saw I've seen a guy up there a couple of times, and tonight while I was sitting at my table, I could see him driving around on a bike, and he had one of those vests on, like fluorescent vests. So I didn't know, is that somebody who's just out riding his bike, or is he actually a security person that somebody has come up with to drive around? I didn't know that. So that leads me to John's recap of what he did when we met. And you had said you had left word with the Vermont Transit about possibly putting up the evaluating the facility and putting up a push button, cross button walk there. And had you heard anything more from them?
Yes, I did. It took me a couple of emails to figure out that the district manager has been replaced. Ultimately, I connected with him. He said he would be doing some sort of evaluation to see if it met their eligibility criteria for installation of a push button crosswalk. I guess the way that it works is that the state may provide for this crosswalk, but then it would become a town issue for maintaining it going forward. That's not a problem. So I stand waiting for further word from them.
Okay.
I'd be happy to use this as an opportunity for me to rattle the cage a little bit and see if they have any more
Yeah,
information.
just curious where it was at. I don't want to see it drop.
Yep.
And I assume you've talked with DPW about the litter, so they're gonna do that. And
As I understand it, they've done some good work with
yeah,
that, and
it looks
also
great up there.
some overhanging brush that have been a concern as well. I've been-
Yeah, that wasn't my concern, but
Okay.
whatever. And yeah, and then you contacted the police, and yeah, so I just want to make sure that this does not become what it has been, and to show my appreciation for the work that you have done by working with the police chief and having him upbeat the patrol. And like I said, no problems up there this winter, really. There was 2 cars a couple of weeks ago that were hanging around a little longer than they should have, you know, with temporary plates and whatnot. And that was the first thing I'd really seen all winter of any sign of this. So it does work, and we do appreciate it. And I hope it will continue through the summer. And you know, if it keeps on as well as it has, I don't see the need for these things. Most of your park and rides are drug problems and hangout problems. And this one being here, I know you said, what are you gonna do when the town gives you, the state gives you money to put up a park and ride? What are you supposed to do? Well, as you know now, for being here, there are 2 exits to White River Junction. And it should have gone at the commercial area, not in this neighborhood. So I'm pretty upset with zoning, as everybody knows. And they just don't seem capable of looking ahead to what their actions have done to the neighbors who live with this stuff. You know, nobody in the town or just driving by say, well, boy, that Marie Elvin's nuts, because nothing's ever happening over there. You're not gonna smell the shit that was somebody did in the bucket that the neighbors have to smell there from camping out there all winter. You're not gonna see the needles that are thrown over the fence where the neighbor could not let her grandchildren go out because of those needles here. Nobody's gonna see that, but it's happening. And appreciate the continuing work up there. And thank you all for what you do.
Thank you, Marie, and it's nice to see you in person. So usually we just hear from you on Zoom.
This is
So
not my thing.
I think Lanny had maybe.
Yeah, Marie, this
Oh, sure.
this strikes me as the statement of Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's being taken care of slowly and methodically.
It is.
So it's
Yeah, I don't.
progress is good,
It is good.
and you can't build it in a day. You can't overcome all the issues in a day, but little baby steps. You got to walk. You know, when I was in the military, we had crawl, walk, run. You know, so you got to crawl before you can walk. You got to walk before you can run. So slow steps
It
makes
is.
a difference.
It is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lanny, for pointing that out. Marie, I'm thank you for pointing out positive developments there, and I
Yes.
imagine you'll let us know in spring and summer.
I'm in really neighborhood crime watch up there. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I can see right out my window
Yeah,
what's
no,
going on
it
that
is.
strip all the time.
And thank you
And
for
I'm not, it's
keeping
been
in
very
touch.
disappointing that, not to be listened to by zoning and have any respect shown, to what's been going on up there. I mean, they just do what they want, and it's, and that's not the only thing, but, we'll stick with that now and on a positive.
All right,
Thank you all very
thanks.
much.
Take care. Any other comment in the room? Anyone on Zoom?
No hands up at the moment.
Okay, we will move to select board comments and announcements. Kim, do you have anything? Dance on here, Mary, anything?
Not specifically dealing with the town, but I know that the first Saturday in March, the Poor People's Campaign is up in Montpelier. So if anybody's interested in getting involved in the Poor People's Campaign, I think it's March 2nd is the first Saturday.
Thanks, Mary. Ally, do you have any select board comment?
I do, yeah. First off, just want to say I will be off camera for the meeting just because I'm recovering from a minor neck injury, so apologies there. But I'm very much here. I also wanted to share that on Monday, the Hartford Fire Department had a community stakeholder input meeting with various folks in the community, and it was facilitated by the Center for Public Safety Excellence. I was there, Mike was there, as well as some other movers and shakers in the community to be part of the first step in their strategic planning process, which is part of their accreditation process. So was grateful to be invited into that process and interested to see what unfolds with their strategic planning process in the department. And then also Monday evening, we had a second meeting of the process management team for our community safety study with Strategy Matters. They asked us about our different definitions and understandings about what safety means to us. So we had a really robust discussion about what that looks like. And so Strategy Matters will be pulling that into a working definition of what safety means for Hartford, and we'll keep revisiting that. They also asked us about ways to ensure that there's equitable access for the community to take part in the process. So the very beginnings of the outreach plan there. So it was a community safety filled day, and I was grateful to take part. That's all for me.
Thanks, Ally. Rocket, anything?
It's an honor to serve. Thanks.
Thanks. Lanny, you have anything?
Not this evening.
Okay, I don't have anything either, so we can get to our main item, which is the review of the transfer station site assessment. I'll turn it over to John if you want to give us a quick intro
Yes,
and
please.
sort of tell us the parameters of what we're going to discuss.
It can be overwhelming if we add too many topics into one stew. So my only comments are that there are lots of issues regarding garbage, recycling, construction and demolition material, the landfill, etc. Hopefully we'll avoid the temptation to conflate all of these issues tonight. What is really before the select board and the town tonight is a transfer station site evaluation, which has been performed by Sanborn Head at the request of the select board. After we have completed the presentation and discussion, we will then discuss guidance that the town will be giving to Sanborn Head regarding its ongoing work on a feasibility study about the future uses of the transfer station facility and the land that it occupies. We would then expect to meet once more, at least with Sanborn Head, when they've completed their work on a feasibility study. Separately, of course, we can discuss issues such as the need to remove and dispose of construction and demolition material from the landfill. There, in fact, is a state order requiring this to occur. We can also separately discuss the town's curbside recycling program, which was approved a number of years ago by the voters, but recycling laws have changed, and this may prompt the town to reconsider its approach in this area. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Brian and Chris, who will handle the discussion.
had a quick question.
I just want to clarify what I'm hearing for the context of this meeting and reinforcing what I saw in the packet. Tonight's discussion is singularly focused on the facilities, the buildings and the premises there. And all of these other topics you mentioned would be best held at a separate date.
Yes.
Perfect. And in terms of just the presentation itself, obviously there was quite extensive information, which was great. I think for myself, when we approach engineering conversations, I found it very helpful to understand the primary high-level recommendations and points, more so than diving into the weeds. That entering the conversation later for me has been helpful in terms of first understanding the premise and the recommendation. My own 2 cents.
Yeah. Kim, and then we'll turn it over to Brian.
Sort of, so. Like, maybe I'll just hear the presentation, and then if I still have those questions, I'll ask them, because I've got a similar question to Rocket, but yeah, why don't I hear what you have to say first, and then I'll.
Benny?
Yeah, having the engineering background that I do, I enjoy the nuts and bolts of things. So I really want to hear the details of how the study was done, and I find it particularly interesting the depths that we went to. So I want to learn some more about that. So looking forward to hearing things.
You guys can kick it off for us.
You have anything that, Chris, before I go? Nope. No. All right. I'll share the presentation here. All right. Looks like everything's working as it's supposed to. Again, my name is Brian Bodwin. I'm an engineer with Sanborn Head & Associates. I've been in the solid waste industry for well over 20 years and lead our solid waste client service area for our company. I'm based out of our Burlington, Vermont office. We started working for the town back in 2021, initially by doing an evaluation of the redemption and recycling building to try to figure out how methane was getting into that building, and provided a report back in that year summarizing that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how that kind of translates into some of the work that we're doing as part of this evaluation in a minute. We've also helped out with the construction demolition evaluation a couple years ago, and today I'm going to talk to you about the site evaluation report that we did last year. I can change my screen here.
Should we be trying to follow along in the report, or will it really not allow us to follow along?
It's somewhat in that order, but if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm gonna try to keep it high, and I'll get into the weeds when I think I need to get in the weeds, but I can certainly get into the weeds a lot more afterward if you want. Good.
I would just comment that I don't mind detail at all, especially if it helps the case. But I do think we are asked to read the packet. So for myself, it's like, why read the packet if it's all going to be presented? Not to say that is what you're going to do, but that's just my general philosophy on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it high level.
Yeah, thank you.
So the evaluation basically involved 4 kind of aspects to it. The first thing was to do a subsurface exploration. And the main reason for that is we really wanted to find out the vertical and horizontal extents of the municipal solid waste that was buried out there. As probably some of you have encountered, especially the older folks in the room, back in the day, landfills kind of just buried their waste anywhere. And this is a good example of how waste was placed in online landfill and kind of went in a bunch of different locations, and makes it difficult to develop in the future, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to figure out, where the waste actually is. The second part of what we looked at was the methane and the migration of methane, and ways we could potentially use some of the existing gas collection systems that are there to extract some of that methane and keep it from getting into the buildings. The third thing we looked at was basically the site structures. Really high level evaluation, just trying to figure out what kind of maintenance needs, if there's anything drastic that needed to be addressed, like cracked foundations or systems, because it is up against a landfill where there is settlement. Wanted to take a look at that and really just provide kind of a rough cost of what we believe it would take to make the necessary repairs. And lastly, we looked at the water supply and wastewater systems for the facility. We understand that the town has had some issues with the water supply and leach field in the past, and so we were asked to kind of take a look at that and look for alternatives. So that's what I'm going to talk about in a nutshell. So the first thing that we looked at was the subsurface, and what this plan is in the report, and a lot of the stuff you'll see in this presentation are plans that were attached as appendix in the appendices. But to kick off our exploration program, we really wanted to find out what had been done in the past at the site. So we did a file review with the town, looked at all the records, and fortunately, we were actually able to find a bunch of borings that were installed in 1991. Those are kind of shown in red here on this plan, and were really helpful to let us know where waste was encountered back then, and allowed us to use that information to lay out where our subsurface exploration should be. And the goal here is really to find out how close to the recycling and redemption building that waste was going into other structures. And because the closer the waste is to the building, the more likely the methane is going to be a consistent issue. Also allowed us to figure out the thickness of waste to figure out if that's something that could be mitigated relatively easy and inexpensively. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So the subsurface explorations that we performed were done last June, and they're shown in blue. And what we basically found was that waste was present at pretty thick stratigraphy in the area where you enter the facility. And that's probably, for those of you that use that facility, you can see kind of the drop in grade as you drive in. That's because that's where the greatest thickness of waste is. And we really found that waste goes right up to that southwest corner of the building. So I don't know if my cursor will be seen. Let me see if I can move it. It doesn't, oh, there it is. So this location here, these locations actually were found to have waste at 17 to 40 feet below ground surface. So well below the foundation system, adjacent to the foundation system of the building. And you can see how close those borings are to the building. And we basically found that to be true here as well, just to the south, SH9. This boring found waste between roughly 9 feet and 34 feet below grade. And then it tapers off pretty drastically as you go to the north, which is expected. These black dashed lines, one is basically what we determined was the boundary of waste with the borings that were done in 1991. The closer one to the south, I guess, if you will, to the outer edge of the building, is what we decided probably is where the waste is. And again, that's just through interpolation based on the depths of waste and what we found here. But what is pretty clear is that waste basically abuts up against that building, really close to it anyways, the foundation system. So that matters, right? That's basically how the gas is migrating into the building one way anyways. When you have waste right up to the building with no kind of preventative measures, gas is going to get in there. And so I'll get into that a little bit more. Again, just got to finish up the explorations. What we typically found in borings that actually had municipal solid waste in them is that waste thickness ranged from about 11 to 34 feet thick. And most of those locations were covered with fill ranging from 2 to 17 feet thick. One thing that the town has done over the years is gone out there as settlement has occurred. They've gone out and placed fill. And so some of that fill, I'm sure, is due in part to that. So the next thing we did was perform a settlement evaluation. And really just wanted to get a rough idea of how much settlement may have occurred since the site was built. And just kind of for your own education, there's two types of settlement when it comes to waste. There's primary settlement. And primary settlement, if you can envision, when you put your head in the pillow settles pretty immediately. That's primary settlement. That doesn't necessarily have to happen immediately, but it's basically due to the weight of whatever's above that mass. And so the weight above the waste is going to cause it to settle. The secondary type of settlement is through the degradation of waste. So over time, the organics in waste, as they decompose, cause that waste area to settle. So that's the other thing that's occurring. And that's why you're seeing that settlement occur over time. So you've had that kind of initial settlement when the site was built, when areas have been filled. And now you've seen over the last 30 years since waste was placed in there, that secondary settlement over time that's decompressing and dropping in grade. So what this plan shows is a comparison of topography that we were able to find. In 1994, there was topo that was done, I assume, right after the building was constructed. And that's what this base plan is showing. We compared that with topography from 2022. And that's what these colored lines represent. So what this showed basically is that up to 6 feet of settlement has occurred when you compare that 1994 data to the 2022 data. That's just the minimum settlement, really, because there's been a lot of settlement that's occurred over time, and you guys have gone out and filled those areas. So it's the settlement that's actually occurred there has been far greater than that. And again, if you look at this plan, where that 6 feet of settlement is roughly where on the southern end of that vegetated island, if you will, and in the parking area. And it decreases to 0 feet where it transitions to just native material. And as you get closer to the building.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
When you say native material, can you expand upon what you mean by native?
Well, native, I shouldn't probably just, it's not definitively native, but material that doesn't contain waste. So it's basically, that area is probably that's been relatively undisturbed where there hasn't been a lot of fill place. So it's material that was there when God made the land, you know. So again, this basically shows that the settlement that's occurring really corresponds well to where the greatest thickness of waste was found. So the next thing we looked at was the methane venting system. And I mentioned earlier that we had done an original assessment, I think it was in 2021, of the recycling building. And for those of you who don't know, there's some methane alarms in there, and they tend to go off sometimes in the winter. And usually that happens in the winters because you get frost on the ground surface and the parking areas where you might have cracks from methane usually can escape into the environment. But when you get that frost there, the path of least resistance is through other avenues. And what we found through this evaluation is that the methane was primarily coming through conduit and other openings in the foundation system. And so we had put together a recommendation at time to have those sealed and looked at. That was looked at by the town electrician, and the costs were higher than they anticipated. So we were asked to kind of go back and look at, are there any other alternatives to address the methane issue? So we talked about basically looking at whether or not there was an active gas collection system, but was there anything else tied to the building? And so again, reviewed the files that the town had, and we found that the recycling building actually, hopefully it's there, but it has, the construction drawings showed that there was a venting system comprised of 4-inch diameter pipe, basically below the slab and around the inside of the foundation. That's kind of shown by the dashed line inside the building footprint. My mouse isn't there we go. It keeps disappearing. But anyways, inside the building footprint, see that center line that runs kind of north and south. That's where the pipe is, along with the inside of that foundation wall. And so those are tied to 2 vertical methane stack vents, one on the north end of the property and one on the west end. And the idea there is that's a passive venting system. So it was designed to basically, as the gas comes into that pipe, it passively goes through the vents out the top. Basically, they rise above the roof line. And the idea is that that path of least resistance is going to have the methane that builds up below the building go through that instead of through the slab itself and into the building. What they also had at this facility is an active gas collection system. And you can see the dashed lines outside of the building footprint to the southwest, and then towards that one line that goes down towards the landfill. Well, what happened historically is all of that was connected to a large vacuum system. So an active gas collection system is basically when you have perforated pipe that's placed in the waste and it's connected to a vacuum, and then it's basically conveyed to a combustion device. So it can be, that methane is basically combusted. It doesn't harm the environment. And so that used to all be done through a flare that's still out there, but hasn't been used, my understanding, for quite some time. So what we wanted to do is look at both of these features and figure out, could they be reused? Is there a way we could use this as a trial to see if it mitigates the methane issue? And when we talk about the settlement that's occurred in the parking area, if you look at where this pipe work is to the southwest of the building, that's right where all that settlement occurs. And what happens when you have gas pipe like this, it's placed laterally in waste, over time that settlement basically causes dips and it breaks the pipe. And so more likely than not, all that pipe has been compromised at this point, because there's been, at least 6 feet of settlement, probably more like 10 to 15 feet of settlement over the last 30 years. So we could look into whether or not that pipe work works and still functions, but we'd have to do some further explorations and costly explorations, which I don't feel would be worth the while.
Is that like, sir, is it like perforated French drain pipe, or is it what?
Very
kind of pipe
similar,
are we
yeah.
talking?
Yep.
So it's not flexible at all then?
No, it should be, it's probably ADS pipe
Okay,
and it's probably got slots in it, kind of like a sewer pipe, a leach field pipe.
okay,
That's my guess.
all right, that makes sense, why it would break.
And so, yeah, especially when you have differential settlement, you can imagine that load, it kind of pushes it down. It has basically causes the pipe to bend and sometimes fail.
What level is that pipe at? Low grade?
I don't really know. There's not really much as-built information on that. It just shows it going through that area.
So we don't have below frost line either.
It's definitely below the frost line.
Right.
Yeah, and my guess with all the fill that's been placed out there, it's pretty deep.
Right.
I think we did find some elevation points where it gets close to the that retaining wall to the south end of the building. It was my recollection, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was like 8 to 10 feet down. So our assessment really is that former active gas collection pipe really wouldn't suffice and couldn't be used, although it's something that we could look at. I think what makes the most sense, and this is where we get into our recommendations, is to look at a depressurization system. So basically what we could do is we could take that pipe that's located below the slab of the building and connect it to basically a centrifugal vacuum blower, kind of just like a sub-slab system, and see how that works first. If that works and provides the mitigation that you need, then great, probably no additional work would be needed. If it doesn't, then we'd probably have to look at doing some type of active gas collection system outside of the building as well, in between the wall and waste. And that would require some excavation of waste to create basically a separation and to put in that system. The other thing we could do is look at an HVAC system. I don't think for the current use of the building, this really would work as intended, because you have large bay doors that are open. But the idea is that you can have pressurized HVAC systems that basically create pressure in the building so that outside contaminants can't come in. Another thing to look at, especially if you repurpose that building down the road. Again, I think sealing some of the conduit in the building, we did identify 3 or 4 locations that were the most, that were causing most of the issue. Taking a look at that and sealing those, I think really the town should focus on and would help considerably. And talked about already the past events on, actually this is related to, it's probably from an electrical standpoint, it's something electricians want to do, but another thing that could be looked at is basically in the conduit runs of electrical is putting some type of vent system on that. So vents outside instead of in the building. Again, that's probably a little bit more costly, but something that could be looked at.
A question.
Sure.
Or two. Methane, obviously we don't want it in the buildings. Are there studies that talk about the health impacts of people being around methane for prolonged periods?
Yeah, when it comes to landfill gas, methane is more of an explosive concern. And so really what you're concerned with landfill gas is hydrogen sulfide. This waste is, I'm not saying there isn't any hydrogen sulfide there. This waste is 30 some odd years old. More of the hydrogen sulfide concern probably would be where your C&D is, just because hydrogen sulfide generally is a result of decomposing gypsum, wallboard, that type of things.
The other question I had was, are there any modalities by which we could use the methane for, energy production? We have an environmental sustainability coordinator who's looking at wastewater heat. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you've seen where people harvest or harness methane.
Absolutely.
Like farms and what have you.
Do it all the time on landfills. There's landfill gas energy facilities that basically take the gas and convert it to electricity. The landfill in Coventry, for example, has 5 genset.
Lebanon has something
create electricity from the methane. But they're an active landfill taking in waste. Yeah. It's obviously a much newer landfill where the waste hasn't decomposed. So the rule of thumb with waste decomposition is basically after that day you put the piece of garbage in the ground, it takes about 30 years generally for that to decompose, where it's not really producing much methane anymore. And you're at that point. So you have methane probably from some, pockets of methane from some degradation of waste, but there's probably not enough to really put in some type of system. There are companies out there that have small generators that can run on landfill gas at 5 to 15 cubic feet per minute, which is not a lot of gas at all. But I think the site here would really benefit from that.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on?
And I don't know if whether you could answer this question or not, but I don't know if in DPW, is there any plans, the built plans for that structure out there? Was there a vapor barrier put underneath the concrete when it was built? You guys have any idea about that?
I don't think so. The plans, I mean, they have the plans. We can,
I didn't know back then if they did that or not. And
the records are spotty.
so we don't know if it's actual.
We have construction drawings, but we don't have as-built drawings. So that's
Right.
always the things like what's really out there. I did
Right.
look at the side of the building. It looks like the vent is there when I walk the site. So
We don't know if it's actual, if the methane is leaking up through the electrical piping, and over time methane can seep through concrete. I don't know. We don't know if it's coming up through the concrete even, correct?
Yeah, so we did the study we did in 2021, we actually walked with what's called the flame ionization detector and walked and looked at every penetration in the slab, in the walls, and basically put together a report that showed where the methane was coming into the building.
So it's nothing through the concrete then, basically?
No,
Okay.
no,
That's-
it's mainly into penetrations. Again, it's gonna go to the path of least resistance, and it's a lot
Understandable.
easier for it to go through the cracks where the slab meets the foundation wall than it is through the concrete itself.
Understand. Thank you.
So Lenny, the problem with the penetrations is a lot of the conduits are on top of each other.
Yeah.
And to put the seals into code properly, they're way too close. They need more space. And so to bring everything in new through the wall, basically the electricians need to bring all new services into the building. And they were talking about going all the way back to the street to have to do it. So not at all what we were hoping for.
Good.
Any other questions? All right. So the next thing we looked at, we're moving on from the methane matter now to kind of the site structures evaluation. So we looked at basically all the structures on site, primarily focused on the recycling redemption building, the former public works office, the office building, the scale house, and the HHW building. We did look at the former scale house and the former flammable storage building and water belt structure as well. But we really didn't put a lot of time into that because those are just kind of ancillary buildings that really aren't going to matter much the long-term functioning of this facility for the town. So I'm just going to go through some of the high points and findings of our evaluation, then I'll get into the cost. So the recycling redemption building, really all the structures were in pretty good shape from a foundation standpoint, the main structures. Based on what we could see. This is the building that basically abuts the waste. In this bottom right-hand picture, you can see kind of some settlement along the sidewalk. That actually has progressed a little bit. That's a sure sign of the waste settling that we talked about. That's about 40 feet deep and that right off the corner of that building. The good news is I really didn't see any cracks in the foundations or anything like that due to differential sediment issues. So the structure of the building seems to be pretty sound. There are some minor cracks like we show in the upper right hand corner. That's just in the slab in the main garage out back. A lot of the work that needs to be done there is really removing mold, mildew on the siding, probably replacing some of the rotten siding and painting. There are some doors that are rotten and a couple broken windows as well. And as you can see in the front of the building through these windows, there's just, again, some fascia that needs to be replaced and reworked. Again, nothing really major there. The HHW building and the flammables building and water vault structure. The HHW building is in really good shape. The gable ends, there's some slats that are missing in the vents in the attic. I would replace those as soon as possible because there's probably some I'm sure some rodents living up there, especially bats and birds primarily. The other buildings, you know, the former Flammables building, which is the one in the middle top, that's actually the two middle pictures. That's probably at the point where it just doesn't make sense for you to maintain it at all. I would just get rid of it. It's not really being used, and it's kind of an eyesore. The former scale house in the bottom left-hand corner, I don't think that's being used for anything but maybe some storage. It could use a new roof and some painting. Nothing major there. Again, a building probably that doesn't need to be there at all anymore and might be worth getting rid of, but really just needs minor maintenance to be usable. And then we have the water vault structure, which is right, it's the top left image. That seemed to be all in all in pretty good shape. Needs, again, some minor maintenance and painting and repairs. The office building, again, the structure was in good shape. It needed just some minor painting. Primarily in the back of the building, there was some, you know, rotting fascia on the top and bottom. And but overall, that building was in pretty good shape. We did notice in the inside, I guess yeah, I'll go for the inside of the building, primarily the boiler room. There was some black material growing along the floor drain. Typically mold doesn't grow on concrete, so it's probably not mold, but something you might want to just clean up. I don't know really what that is. And some of the pipes appeared to be leaking, but it could be condensate related. Again, this was in June, but something the town should look into. Upper right photo, we have, again, just some minor paint repair along the post, and some front doors, some rot on the front doors as well. The sidewalks, all in all, were in pretty good shape. This is one location in front of the office building where one of the storm drains is broken, needs to be replaced, and kind of the curb and concrete sidewalk there just repaired a little bit. Again, all pretty minor. Scale house building. This is just built on grade. Not much to this building at all. For those of you who have dropped off your waste there, it's functional. I think it serves its purpose. Does not need to be replaced for its purpose. There are some broken windows. Both service windows do need to be replaced. The roof is in probably in need of repair as well. Generally, the parking area behind the scale house, the drop-off area needs some minor falling over. Driveway. So this is where the biggest cost is, depending on what the town wants to do. There's been a lot of repair out there over the years. You can see the different cuts in pavement, especially in the upper right photo, and around the island in the middle of the photo. You can see just how the grades have settled. To really bring this up to grade so there isn't a dip would cost a lot of money, and I'll get into those costs in a second. But this is probably where, if you wanted to really bring this up to grade and make it a smooth transition, would take some effort. One of the things we recommended, especially if you decide to do away with the former Public Works office, which I haven't touched on yet, is to relocate the entrance on that end of the facility, because there's no waste there. You're not going to have to deal with settlement. You might be able to access the facility through that area. Something to consider. The former Public Works building, in my mind, is a complete loss. I think it would cost a lot of money for you to rehab that to the point where it's worth it for the town. Not spend a lot of time in this building because it was in rough shape. Definitely there's signs of rodents living in the basement. You can see the insulation, the upper left-hand corner where it's been pulled down. Some, water damage. The basement windows were missing. I think that's the primary way animals are getting in and out of there. The windows, most of the windows were in good shape in the building and have been replaced with vinyl windows. There still are a few that need to be replaced. But really the building is just old. It's got a stone foundation. There's cracks in it, and probably a full demo on that in my mind. So these are our opinion of costs that we had for this evaluation. So the recycling redemption building, it's about $60,000. the HHW building and adjacent structures, it's about 27. That does include like painting the former scale house and that water structure. The office building, about 36,000. That's primarily just painting and fixing that drain in front of the building and the curb. The scale house building, that's putting a new roof on it, replacing the windows, painting it, and getting that up to speed. The retaining walls, that's primarily just replacing the railings, right, for all of it. Driveway, so 452,000. So that's a huge cost. Probably not worth it in my mind. So what that is so there's really, the way to do this right would be to remove all the waste and place fill back in structural lifts, which quite frankly would cost millions. It's not worth it. This cost was basically to go in where we have had these areas that have settled, and basically strip the asphalt, place fill, and then place the asphalt back, and that's it. And you're going to probably have the problem occur again. So again, I don't think it's worth that cost, but that's what it would take to get it to grade. I didn't even go down the road of removing the waste because it's just something that would, in my mind, never happen, and not something you guys should even consider. Yes.
So in that scenario, I guess we'll still come back to this, but that if we were to do the alternate entrance, is there a world in which you could do the alternate entrance and then either just not use that part of the driveway or dig it up but not put the asphalt back?
It would involve reconfiguring some of what you're using the property for back of the building. There is a drop in grade there that you'd have to get down to, so there'd have to be a transition there. It would take some effort, but the long-term use of the property, especially if you're to use it for something else down the road, I'm sure that would be looked at. The best new entrance and where it's going to be least costly to develop. But that just is something I think that you should consider, but it would not be, it's not free, that's for sure.
So just to add to that, please note that some of the driveway is right up against the building where we have settling. In fact, the porch is on top of that settling. So some of that cost, that 452, goes right up against the building. So like you'll understand if you use the Redemption Center now, there's no legal ADA access there. The curb is, gotten really tall. Portion of that parking lot has to be fixed.
Yeah, so if you're to use that other access and you still wanted to use the building to its full extent, let me just go back to the picture here so I can kind of explain it.
I guess another way to explain these costs, this is to use the facility status quo.
Right.
We're not into the feasibility of alternative uses. Yeah.
So what I was saying, basically, you have to come in the back of the building and come back this way. But to Chris's point, the waste comes right up against this building. And so if you wanted to use this area, even if you're to use this facility to gain access to this drop-off area, again, it's not really ideal. It's just an alternative. You still want access to the front of the building. And so the idea would be is to fill this in or leave it as is, I guess, get rid of the asphalt and then just end the usable space in the parking area right here. So everything to the south where you have a major settlement wouldn't really be used anymore. But you'd have to put some fill in on the south end to get this up to grade for use to Chris's point.
So I guess I remember a day when we lived without pavement. And I'm just wondering why it is we have to have that paved down there. For $452,000, it seems like we can chuck in some gravel and some hard pack and not worry about the paving. Paving is a luxury we don't need in a transfer station. That's just ridiculous to even consider that we would repave it again. I don't know why they paved it to start with. I mean, all this settling that's going on, you're right, it's going to continue to settle. Throw another load of gravel, throw another load of hard pack on it. It's ridiculous to even consider, the aspect of paving. And I don't know why that was even considered.
Sure. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what that building was used initially, but even
if you were to put heavy fire trucks across there to run down below, and they would, compact the soil, fire trucks travel on gravel roads all the time. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. We're talking about paving. I wouldn't, If I was a taxpayer, I wouldn't stand for that. I don't stand for
The
it.
town's consideration, that's all.
Can I just also clarify, and I apologize, I did read everything, but if I don't know the answer to this, and maybe I should, but was that building there, so when the landfill was there, and that's waste was piled up there, was the building there, or did the building come after?
The building came after the landfill. I don't think the original delineation and planning of where the building went was accurate enough. And in reality, we'd be in a lot better world if that building had been twisted to the northeast.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
So the demo for the former Public Works building, so this does, if you guys end up doing a hazardous evaluation, buildings evaluation, materials evaluation, you're probably gonna find some additional materials that are gonna bump this cost up. The quote I got was basically 15 grand for the demo for the size of the building, so there's some fluff in there for some of the other items that you might encounter. But if you encounter asbestos and other items that are more costly to dispose of, this number could certainly go up. So you definitely need to do hazardous buildings materials assessment before you consider tearing down the building and get permits for that. Obviously, that's the route you go. And if you rehab it, you're gonna probably want to do the same thing, because you're gonna be replacing a lot of the structure to really make it work. You're going down to the frame and starting from that.
Is the foundation solid?
It's a stone foundation, so there are some cracks in it. Could it be rehab in some areas? Probably, but again, I just don't think with all the effort to bring that up to par to today's standards and codes, it'd be very difficult to do it in a cost-effective manner.
Yeah.
So another thing we should note, this is status quo. So these costs don't include our energy, rules and regulations. So once we change the use, like he had mentioned, the doors opening and the pressurization, along with that, if you're going to that extent of change, when you get to the next step in feasibility, the costs are higher.
Absolutely. These costs are just to get the buildings to where they should be to maintain maintenance. Really, that's what they're based on.
And then the facility would still lose money and still have hazardous stuff going. Thank you.
The last thing we looked at, and I know this plan is busy, but there's a lot of information on it, is to look at the water supply and leach field locations for the facility. Our understanding is the water flow rate has been minimal at best and not providing adequate flow. And the leach field has been compromised several times due to water flow into the leach field area and other areas where you guys have had to rehab it. So we looked at kind of locations to provide those utilities. When it comes to a water supply well, the Vermont rules are is you can't have a water supply well for potable source as a potable source within 1,000 feet of a landfill. So that's what this blue line is. It's a 1,000-foot radius from the landfill. And really, when it comes down to properties, there is one property that's mostly vacant to the west of the facility. That's kind of here shown in this green proposed water supply well location. That's just outside of that may serve its purpose for you folks. The town had done kind of a evaluation of the leach field a couple of years ago, and one of the locations that was brought up through that study was to locate that leach field further to the east. So that's what we're showing here is basically the leach field's currently in this location. The proposed location would be further to the east. And that's all I have.
You didn't include any rough cost estimates for that, did you?
We did not. So that is one of the items that's part of the feasibility evaluation. When we get to that, that's part of that as well.
So one of the questions I had that came out of this is you talked about reusing the methane venting system that is there.
Yeah.
Have we examined that system of ducting to see how intact that is and at what point it would have to be tied into to put it into the flame stack?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be connected to the flame stack again. It would actually just be connected to a blower system that vents it.
But have we run a camera in there to know?
Not yet, nope.
So we don't even know, I mean, you say reuse it, but we don't know what kind of
Yes,
extent it
that'd be the
is.
next thing needs to be done. So I did look and see that the vent is on the outside of the building.
Right.
And we'd have to basically, what I would do most likely is put a vacuum on one side of it and put a gauge on the other to see if you're getting vacuum influence from one side to the next.
How much vacuum does it require to get an adequate flame?
It's really, so a subsurface system is really low vacuum. We really just want to depressurize that so you're not allowing the methane to get into the slab above.
Remind me how many parts per million methane you have to have to burn.
To burn?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. It's irrelevant.
I'm just wondering if you can burn it off instead of just letting it
I
escape.
don't know that number off the top of my head.
So it's better off just let it escape.
Well, it's going to be too low to have a combustion.
Okay, that's my question.
That's
All right,
going to be the issue.
All right.
So older landfills like this, what they tend to do is once they no longer can use an active gas collection system, they have what are called solar flares. And basically all it does is it's got a little solar panel on it with a spark plug, and it just creates a constant spark. When the gas gets enough to the higher enough concentration in that pipe, so it'll actually combust, that spark will ignite it, and it'll burn until there's not enough gas again. That's something that could be looked at here in this situation, but it's probably not going to be necessary. One of the things we would look at is when you put a vacuum on that system is how much methane are you getting out of it?
And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions from methane?
It's minor. Methane is a big deal, don't get me wrong, but this would be a very minor situation.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but with the vacuum system, he's actually pulling it out. We're not as worried about the conduits coming in versus if you just hook up the other one, your mother nature, it's going on its own and you're hoping it ignites.
You talking about the active system? I guess I'm not understanding your question. Sorry.
So if we just rehook up the stack with the ignition, the solar that we have, right?
The flare, you mean?
You mean the flare?
Yeah. Like it's going to be a lot safer system to actively be sucking it out and
In the
gas.
vacuum system, we say for.
It's still going into the building.
right. There's still the opportunity for it to go in the billing words. If we are actively, vacuuming it out, it's a lot safer system, I would imagine, for that particular.
Yeah, it's safer and it's common. I mean, they build sub-slab systems like this all the time, built for buildings that are built in contaminated areas. This is not an uncommon practice. So what's happened basically is that you're kind of at a point where it's challenging because when you have a lot of methane being generated, you can do exactly what you used to do here. You can have a flare, you can burn it off, but you're not at a point where you're just not getting enough gas to do anything with it. Right. But it is becoming a problem in a building where it can build up, right? So when it's just vented to the atmosphere, it's not ideal, don't get me wrong. It's methane, nobody wants to release methane in the environment. It's a small amount. But, again, part of that evaluation would look at what the best practice scenario would be for the methane and depending on the concentrations, what could be done with it.
Is there any way that you can do a positive pressure ventilation system on that from within the building to force the gas through versus putting a high price vacuum system into it?
I guess so we talked about the HVAC system being pressurized. If you're talking about putting a pressure
The
on
methane,
pipe
the
itself.
actual methane venting system, you should actually pressurize that to drive out your ground gases versus.
The problem with that is in the remediation world, it's almost like it's called an air sparter. So you're basically pumping in air to try to move contamination. Problem is you don't know where that contamination is going to go. It could get pushed right into the building.
Because we don't know how attacked the slab is or the venting system. Okay.
So you're
Where's
better off.
the vacuum system?
And get rid of it.
Is the cost of a positive pressure system about equal to a negative pressure system?
The HVAC system, positive pressure system would be much more than. That's why what we're recommending is trying to go through the lowest cost approach first. And that would be doing something with a sub slab where instead of just having it like it is now, where it's passively going through vents, is to put a vacuum on it.
Negative pressure system, right? How much negative pressure are we talking about, John?
It's probably just a couple inches
of
water.
So Brian and Chris, you have a memo you prepared for us on scenarios? Is that something we should go to next?
That John will tell us when we go to that.
I mean, if you're done with questions about the site assessment, seems like it'd be a good time to transition.
So it looks like
to the
we've got
future.
a couple questions.
Just a couple,
Yeah, sure.
probably my naivete, but when you were doing the borings.
Yep.
Are you looking for something specific, or are you just looking at what's in there, what has settled?
We're looking for waste. In this situation, we're looking for waste. We did screen the waste too for methane.
Right.
It volatilizes pretty quickly when it comes out of the sample, so you're just getting a rough idea whether or not methane was present. That's kind of summarized in a report. But really we were there trying to figure out what the material below grade looked like. So, what we found basically is you kind of drill through the asphalt first, right? In areas where the parking area.
Right.
And then you've got usually a subcourse material of aggregate below that to support the asphalt. Then usually we found here was fill, and below that waste. And then once you got to the waste, you got kind of whatever material was there.
I noticed a lot of it was plastic, and there was something called black cardboard.
Yeah, so the black cardboard is really what happens when waste degrades is it turns black.
Okay.
And so a lot of the waste there is degraded. So you're left with a lot of the inorganics that don't degrade over time,
Okay,
like the plastics and some other things.
right.
I have one thing to follow on what Mary had, if I might. What I read here, how you went 45 feet below grade structure.
Yep.
Why was the determination 45 feet? Because I have the benefit of going down to that structure when I was a wee little lad. And I remember the banks being quite high. Now, that may be because I was a wee little lad and they looked very high, or it may be because it was higher than 45 feet. But I remember the bank being extremely high, and it seems to me like, memory serves me correctly, it was more than 45 feet. So
Yeah, so reason we stopped there, we drilled to the point where we got through the waste and we're into what we felt was native material. It's material that was below the waste. That's why we stopped at that depth.
So we also don't know what's happening, like on the former landfill, underneath where the solar panels are or anything. That's still
Out
right?
of scope.
But that's
out of
landfill gas that could be still
It's out of
reaching
scope.
across to where we're at now.
We're still out of scope. Mr. Chair, if we could just bring this back.
I would like us to
Wow.
move on to
Wow.
the agenda that was given. If there are no more questions that.
And as we mentioned, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I just want to say I thought that was a very well done presentation. I appreciated that as a compliment to the packet we got.
Thank you.
Yeah, for someone who is not an engineer, I found both the report and the presentation quite comprehensible, so I appreciate that.
So when Brian and I and Chris met over Zoom with the other Brian, French Brian, we decided, or we agreed among ourselves, that maybe Sanborn Head was looking for more guidance from the select board about what scenarios to explore as they do their feasibility study. Just to remind the board, there was never an RFP process, right?
There was a negotiation process with the highest ranked RFQ engineer, so.
Right. So anyway, that's what Chris and Brian have been doing, Brian Gazda, trying to develop some scenarios that they think are realistic options that the select board may wish to consider for the future of that facility to help guide Sanborn ahead with their next stage, which would be feasibility. Am I got that right?
Well,
Chris?
the tasks are essentially the same task rewritten and just clarified a little bit. The question comes whether or not, because there's a lot of political talk and so forth, do you want them to focus not on all of these tasks? Do you want them to focus on perhaps two of these tasks? Are you at the point where you want to walk away from any one of these tasks? That's my understanding.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
there's, some friendly discussion that happens within DPW. There's certain different perspectives about maintaining and expanding the benefits of having the transfer station do what it does. And there are other advocates for looking in a different direction. And that's why these scenarios kind of capture both of those approaches.
Lanny and then Rocket.
Yeah, the question that's not been answered yet, though, is, and maybe you're saying we can't ask that question tonight, and if we can't, so be it, but the thing that's not been said yet is the C&D, if we're at a level right now that is acceptable to the state, or whether we got to keep digging. And if that's going to be a cost factor involved, it's because all of the cost factors involved that we still have to do to be compliant with the state are going to drive the decision of this board in the decisions that we make for Sandboard Head to go forward. So we haven't heard anything about that yet.
So the C&D cleanup, obviously there's more digging to be done with the state. That was part of the previous budget process. However, we worked that out. We had our analysis done. We had the volumes calculated, and they sought out the pricing from both Lebanon and Coventry to dispose of the material. We got our budget approved. And then there was a change of management at the Lebanon landfill, and the price skyrocketed to get rid of it there. So that blew our budget out of the water. So we've been looking for alternatives through a New York landfill with a Springfield, Vermont company. We've been searching out every which way to get it done affordably. And we're not quite at a answer there because we're still waiting on a little bit of information from Lebanon and the New York.
But you see
option
where
maybe.
that unanswered question
So,
doesn't allow us to answer more of this.
so that's a short-term problem, but that's a cleanup we have to do. That's not part of the, that's not the, that's not,
It's just
that,
to look at these other options of what we might want.
What-
Lenny, I think we're gonna have to do that regardless of what you.
No, I understand that, but if we have to do that, are we gonna have the money to put into fixing this facility up, or are we gonna look at doing something else? That's my point.
By July 1st, assuming the budget passes, which has another $100,000 for C&D removal.
I mean, if you look
We should have about $500,000 or $600,000 on hand
for the
to
CND,
put towards C&D removal.
Rocket?
John, do you have, first to you and then maybe to our team at DPW? When we look at the feasibility, you were mentioning that there's different opinions and perspectives. Do you have one?
Why don't I give you Brian and Chris
Sure.
to give you their competing visions?
I would love to hear theirs, and I would also love to hear yours.
Yeah. That's,
I'll go first. I guess, being a former town manager up in Bedford, I know that in 2021, when I started there, one of the first things I got hit with was the new agreement that the Lebanon Solid Waste put out with. And working with the Greater Upper Valley, when that first draft came out, it was horrendous. Okay. I remember going to the Greater Upper Valley, which we're, part of that district. Why do we need this? Why would I sign this agreement with Lebanon? And the reason was because Hartford doesn't have C&D. They're not accepting it. Besides that, it sort of kind of forced us to negotiate with Lebanon. And I think you need to really start thinking outside the towns. This is a regional, in 1991, this was built as a regional facility for the 60,000 residents of the Upper Valley. And I think you just keep that in mind, that there were 10 other towns that rely on this facility in one way or the other. And I think that it's feasible for us not just to say walk away from it, do modifications. We got to get it back to where it's a break-even venture, right? We have rates. We have a whole lot of other things we can take a look at that can get it there. I mean, we just have got a letter now. I mean, we've seen an increase in traffic because Lebanon has just raised their rates 33%. And they're going to go up. What they're doing over there. So I just think it's a viable situation. It's a place that we really need to take a hard look at. What can we do there, not just for the residents here in Hartford, but for the region? So that's my take on it.
Sure.
Yes.
May I ask you a follow-up question on it, Brian? Have you run numbers on it? You think that it can work?
Rocket, not as yet, no, I have not.
Because conceptually it makes sense to me, but then I also wonder, to a certain extent, I wonder, is Lebanon raising the rates because they have a monopoly and they can, or are they raising rates because the economics of it are somehow changing and therefore would be difficult for us as well? So I would certainly, I think you make a compelling case. And I think that if we could economically see a path to that succeeding, then that would be worth considering. But if the numbers just don't work, then I don't see it being worthwhile.
So then it's Chris's turn.
So I think most people kind of know my opinion on this. Vermont is not New Hampshire. Lebanon plays by different rules. They're a complete outfit. They have a landfill. They do have a monopoly and an economic advantage over us. They run it like a business, as they should, and they can. So we're in Vermont, subject to Act 145, universal recycling, stewardship programs, paint care, battery care, light bulb things. You do those programs, you open up to everyone in the state of Vermont, whether they're from Hartford or not. That takes important man hours, management hours to manage those programs. It's a drain of our resources, our people. Lebanon, other sources can always undermine us on price for garbage. So they buy a permit to our facility. What do they show up to do? Get rid of their recyclables, or if they're from anywhere, get rid of their paint, their batteries, their light bulbs, the things that we have to take time and manage and face fines for if we don't do it properly. So part of my feeling is C&D is also, it's a volatile marketplace. There's a major increase on getting rid of C&D through Lebanon. You have to manage that very carefully. What we're faced with now is getting rid of 40 years of a buildup of, we didn't have enough money in the fund to process the C&D. So you leave 6 inches, you leave 6 inches. You don't always get it cleaned out. And then it just builds up. And that's anecdotally from people who supposedly know, old timers who know how it happened, that I found out after the fact. A lot of people, we all thought the ground was below what we saw as C&D out there. There were old timers who knew the history and how it got built up, and it was through no fault of anybody running the operation. It's just the funds weren't there. Everything goes up, and you set rates for July 1st. Well, come January 1st, a lot of the rates, or for recyclables or other commodities, what they reimburse you changes with the marketplace. And on January 1st, the prices that, you get charged can go through the roof or change. So, it's not in sync. It's very difficult. So, I mean, I'm not going to get into it too deep. I just think there's an alternative method. I think private industry needs to be fostered in this, and whether that's private industry running the facility or some combination, or maybe we can get into the Upper Valley Solid Waste Management District, and the costs get shared a little bit on the stewardship programs, all of those avenues. But
this scenario too, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
The good news is that all the scenarios are the product of Brian, Gazda, and Chris keeping their heads together and working out compromises.
Okay.
So I'm just to clarify the difference between your perspectives, it seems to come down to costs, to the economics of it, whether or not we can do it profitably, but also, not just the financial side, but the man-hour side. But there's, Chris, what I'm hearing you point out is that there's a difference in the way that the states legislate that is going to, and then the asymmetry of the pricing cycle, where we budget at one point and the prices change at another point. But the underlying concern is really whether or not we can do this sustainably from a financial perspective. Is that fundamentally the difference?
We've got to take a look at, the whole operation down there, Rocco. I was down there the other day looking at the scale and what we have in for pricing and what we're charging. We need to take from an operational point, we got to take a top to bottom review, regardless of, if you take a look at here, what's going on, because we don't know what, even if we were to contract it out, what's a good price for, if a contractor is going to say charge us $500,000 a year to operate it, right? What are our rates going to be? Or are we going to let them set the rates? And if they set the rates, then you're sort of at the mercy of a contractor. Then believe me, can almost guarantee you'll hear from residents on that. So I think that regardless, we have to do that type of business model just to see what it's, what we need to be charging. Is $4.75 enough for somebody to go down there with 3 13-gallon bags? Or do we need to charge more?
And again, our costs get convoluted because of the system we're in. We're not a modern facility with a point of sale system. You can't easily identify all the costs.
Right.
There's a lot of things we get charged for that we don't charge for, and we try to make it up for on the things we do charge for. So it's a difficult analysis that we can't actually do as accurately as we would love to do, just because of a lack of a point of sale system. It's an old Vermont way of doing things with punch cards. And
one question here on these different scenarios, like our job essentially, right, is to say which one of these do we want Sanborn Head and looking
No,
further.
not really, no.
Okay.
Your job is to say, do you generally agree that we should ask Sanborn Head to investigate these options?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Or do you have some other things outside of the box
at
that
what
you'd
cost?
recommend instead?
Well, yeah, at what cost? But
Yeah,
I don't know why we wouldn't, yeah.
Rocket asked for my commentary. Mine is more like, that I appreciate Brian's passion for the region, but I'm all about Hartford. What makes sense for Hartford? And if it means that we can't be the regional hub that we once in our prouder days were, so be it. I want the taxpayer respected as much as possible. Not that Brian doesn't, but just he has maybe a broader perspective of what it could be.
So is the proposal we have from Sanborn Pen Associates include a feasibility study that would incorporate all of these things? Because I mean, I have my own personal leanings in one direction or the other, but I sure would like to see, like, is reconstituting the transfer station actually feasible financially? Like if your feasibility study will just help us contrast, like have a more informed position on that, then I think then we're here to say, yes, please, we would like the feasibility study. And I'm curious what the time frame for what it would take to do that is.
so I'm going to speak for our end on that. He'll speak for his end. Understand the operational cost and the revenue part of what we've been generated and where our marketplace is going. A lot of those numbers are going to come from us. And we have very limited staff right now. So, we'll probably be worse than his time frame.
Oh, in terms of the producing.
We have to work hand in hand in getting them the data they need for what are current revenues, expenditures, what are we looking at, what are we tracking with our costs. I'm working on just putting in our annual reports now. It's like I'm pulling from over here, I'm pulling from over here. It's kind of difficult because we don't have a lot of historical data on some of that.
Yeah.
So,
Will you, Duncan?
Sure.
so if I may, John, you understand where Brian's coming from as part of the Great Upper Valley Solid Waste District.
I do.
We took on,
No, we're not. We're now a standalone.
I understand that. I know that. But when we decided that we were going to be, enveloping that, there was a commitment to the outlying towns at that point in time. And I understand that commitment is done. All right. So I know we're out for Hartford, but do you feel there's any obligation whatsoever to help out surrounding communities?
I think Brian feels strongly that we do. I don't.
I understand that. I didn't ask Brian that question. I asked John Haverstock that
I want to know
question.
what they've done for me lately. what
Why
they've done
wouldn't we
for her.
include all three of these options?
Right,
Ask Sanborn how to do that. That's what I don't understand. Why wouldn't we just say yes, all of the above?
I'm open to that, but it just at what cost?
Yeah,
Right, so he's saying the proposal that we have includes the feasibility
For the most
study
part, yeah.
that would encompass all three of
But
those.
we just took what was in your agreement, and that's your first page of in my memo.
Yeah.
It shows what was in there,
And then
so we just sort of massaged it a little bit, reconsideration of it, and sort of laid it out into a little bit more clearer format.
yeah, I think we all appreciate that. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't go for all three. I mean, unless there's some cost that's prohibitive.
It's just because frankly, Chris, who's the long-termer among the three of us, remembers having not gotten the most clear of guidance about how to move forward with this study. And I think he and Brian Gazda and I agree that we'd like to come before you and make sure, before we go too far down this road, we've got nearby and for
Yeah.
these scenarios.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I think that, sorry,
Yeah, Kim
because
and,
no board is gonna be able to give real guidance without the feasibility studies, right? So, I mean, I have, like I said, an uninformed or not well-informed enough opinion right now of what I see the future of that property is, but, I mean, I'd sure like to know if there's some shambhala of
Shambhala,
the the transfer station of the region.
Shambhala.
Oh, we just don't want the report that comes back to you, you know, the board say, this is not what we were looking at, right? So we just want to make
Okay.
sure that what we're, you know, they're gonna work on is that we're not gonna have to go back and regenerate 14 different drafts of it or whatever like that. That we have that guidance from you.
The one thing that's exciting is that Kim Souza has identified the fact that these issues don't just come up in 2024, but they've been discussed before here in town.
Yeah.
And that there was a pretty elaborate study done of a lot of these issues back in 2015. So we have a nice report that we can share with Sanborn Head to help inform what they're going to be doing going forward.
Rocket, did you sell some?
I do have a comment. Insofar as this is just an update meeting, bringing us to the point of information, appreciate that. Asking for our guidance and approval to move forward with exploring the options. I'm fully supportive of that. I think it's possible that some of these are even just hypothetical considerations. For example, there may not be a private entity or enterprise that wants to take that on. In which case, even if the numbers look beautiful, if it sits dormant for 5 years, it's not a realistic consideration per se. That said, I think it's worthwhile to at least understand what that model and structure would look like. So we have that for posterity in the same way that we have research from years past. I would ask that all of you sitting up here, what is not here on this plan?
Do you want to continue townwide curbside recycling? The law has changed since the town voters approved that, such that perhaps we're providing a subsidy to garbage haulers. Because under Vermont law now, garbage haulers must also remove recycling. So why is the town spending $275,000 a year for that, when in fact, a lot of that money is subsidizing private contractors who are obliged to pick it up anyway?
Mhm.
That's one issue we're not talking about.
But only to their customers.
So may I just clarify on my question and clarify on what you just said?
That's an example.
Right, so I heard at the beginning when you laid out the topic of conversation today, that there are a number of topics that are conversations for a later date. So I understand that. I'm asking within the specific scope of what we are being presented with tonight, when we talk about the feasibility plan and options forward, it's easy for us to look at that and say, great, that sounds awesome. I'm wondering if there are other considerations that were cut out or that we should be also
We had
have.
7 scenarios to begin with, and they whittled them down to try to make it manageable for Sanborn Head.
So,
Chris can talk to that.
so all the scenarios are actually there. It's just some of the scenarios are actually just a deduct, like you take out C and D.
Right.
It's a deduct,
Sure.
right? You know, there's just certain ones of them. It's just a simplified language so that when they write it out, when they give you one of the options, all they're doing is removing one number.
Oh, sure. So it's these are just
It's grouped
combinations, basically.
a little different, yeah.
Lenny and then Kim, and just a quick procedural question for John. Like, if we agree that these are the scenarios we want Sanborn Head to look at, do you expect a motion?
I don't think we need one.
Okay.
Staff has already produced it. We're just telling you that we're proceeding along these lines.
Okay.
So I'm gonna lend some weight to what Chris is saying. In that we also need to consider that we've been approached from both the police department and the fire department about needing new facilities sometime in the future. And if we were to decommission the landfill,
Point of order.
there'll be potential areas that we could
Rocket,
use
point of order.
this.
Yeah, just not relevant to the actual.
Relevancy is not a point of order.
No, I was gonna talk about the same thing.
Relevancy is not a point of
Well,
order.
isn't the scenario number 3 reusing?
Right.
Isn't
That's
that
what I'm
when,
point
like, the
is-
Police and the fire department.
That's
you
my
would look
point
at
is that, well,
Right,
I
so
know what I'm saying is
So
that
my point is, Lanny, is that
it does have
you're-
relevance.
You're advocating for a specific option. We are, as a board, here to consider whether or not we want to encourage the. Department of
I
Public
think he's
Works
just
to be-
advocating for the
I'm
entire
advocating
list.
for a scenario that what Chris is saying of closing the landfill and using it for.
But we
for
can't really
things.
have-
advocate
discussion of
for
it
it until
is-
we get the
is-
feasibility study.
Exactly, it's
That's the
completely
point.
irrelevant without having any numbers whatsoever. It's a hypothetical argument until we have real numbers to consider. So I would move to.
Kim has her hand up.
Approve.
Get you.
Yeah, well, I get that scenario 3 could encompass something like that, a potential training facility, but I did ask earlier, what is it referring to when it says Exhibit A can be utilized as a guide to consider?
That is, as you call in one of our presentations about solid waste and the rules and so forth, we put up a conceptual map of possible ways to reuse it that included like training facility and
Could we either get that again or just find out what meeting it was in? Like, I guess we'd love to.
I can give it
refresh.
to John and John can
Yeah,
send it
great.
out.
I know, rush.
It'll probably have to be a couple emails because it's a couple of the sheets are really large, so.
But that's understanding that there's gonna be a cost involved with that as well, when we do put facilities there.
Everything's gonna
Yeah.
cost.
Oh, yeah, I
everything's
know.
not gonna cost, yeah. But so, and we can't, there's no general estimate of a time frame for feasibility. Like, I know you're saying it's, you guys are.
Probably gonna take a
max-
couple months anyways. Especially, I mean, some of the stuff that I'll talk to these guys.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to get from them what you're gonna need, and then we're gonna have to look, okay, where's this data at? Where do we go back? How many years of financials are they gonna take a look at? What are we gonna try to break down the revenue with the various codes and expenditures and whatnot like that?
You know, and some of what we'll provide him isn't what you see in your budget book right now. Like not having someone to manage the facility, it's killing it. It's, you know, in an assistant, 2 attendants down there is not enough if you're gonna run a full facility, so.
Yeah, we wanna see the feasibility study that's not actually feasible, so, or feasibility analysis that isn't feasible.
Because if you take out C and D and
Unfeasible
Quick Fed, we can show you a
feasibility.
rosy
Yeah,
picture.
we get what you're saying.
Okay.
Brian, I'm forgetting your last name, but just to put you under the hot lights for a second, I'm just wondering, in terms of timeline, you or your firm would be executing on that timeline, is that correct?
Yes.
The photos here were from November 23, is that correct? In the packet we were
I
given.
think
It
the
says.
photos of the site, I think they were from last summer.
Okay, so they were just prepared, the package was.
The
prepared.
package was delivered in
I'm just wondering, in the interest of expediency, and this has been a long, multi-year conversation for the select board. What it is, if there is anything that we as a select board can do to move more expediently in terms of pressing forward for the feasibility study to be done in an expedient fashion with measurable milestones and timeline.
Maybe you've said a couple of months, right?
But that to me is not specific, so.
Okay.
And again, not, and maybe whatever it is that you guys have to go back, I'm not pressing for an answer right now, but just saying that I do think that since it's here, we have momentum, you know, I think it would be nice to move forward and whatever timeline that could be done, if we could get, for example, a memo back to DPW and that passed back to us, so we have at least have an understanding of that project progress.
With the caveat that we can't blame this Brian for delay of providing information from DPW, which is understaffed.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys, I understand that each of you is operating in your own realities of your jobs and responsibilities. But just in terms of our job and responsibility, which is to be part of this process, I think it personally would be helpful for me to understand what that sense of timeline is. And in some ways, it's just also so that the citizens can hold us accountable as the select board to having continued to press forward with just finding good solutions.
May 1st,
Uh,
acceptable?
I was, even at maybe the end of May, I'm just thinking maybe by June first.
And I feel like you guys will in good faith do this.
Give us
as
the-
soon as
Chair.
you can. And I don't know if we want them to randomly pick a date.
No, and I'm not even asking for one right now, but I'm just saying,
Have you got what you need from the board tonight?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you satisfied with what you
Yeah.
got from the board tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Then our job's done.
I mean, if you can, I do understand Rob's wish here, so like as this proceeds, if we could get a date to us, that would be helpful, just even if it's, this is what we're shooting for.
Let me know, we'll give you timelines and we'll make estimates, so give us maybe a few weeks to get back and we can get.
Okay.
And that's really why we had
Just
the
a memo
special,
that this is where it's at.
that's why we had the special meeting tonight, simply because select board agendas get so busy with pressing matters that these things kind of get
Yeah,
pushed off.
right.
So we're glad we can
And
address it
the
tonight.
20th will probably be a big agenda, it'll also be the last one for last meeting. For folks. So Kim, then Rocket, then we'll move to adjourn.
I wanted to say, granted lacking a communications person at this time, but this is an incredible public relations educational opportunity to just like let our community know that how our waste stream operates and the cost of just managing our waste streams in the town. So I don't know if there's any way to capitalize on that with some sort of like, community consulting complementary project or something, but.
Hopefully, I mean, by the time we get the study back and we sort of decide which option we want, then I think it's a matter of we really gotta have some hearings. Have a public hearing, and hopefully at that point have, the sort of advertising. Robert, do you have a final comment or?
Right, so just on the point of timeline, for myself, even if things shift because of extenuating circumstances, at least there's a transparency in that process for us and for the citizenry. That's really what I'm looking for. Not to say that there hasn't been in the past, but I think now with John being in the seat that he's in, and the momentum of the town we have, I think that would be really nice. John, I want to thank you for organizing the special meeting. I think this was a really nice format to do that.
Yes.
Because historically, having this jammed into a regular meeting
We wouldn't.
has led to 4 and 5 hour meetings. So I think that's great. And
Or
Brian-
this would have gotten the short trip,
Yeah.
so.
And I would say to all, like, I really appreciated, I thought the packet was really well done with an extensive appendix, but just pretty succinct memo. And I like that the presentation complemented what we read and didn't just repeat what we read. So I appreciate all of that.
Oh,
Thanks.
can I make one last
Yep.
comment? No, because John, we talked about this. Curbside came up into this. So on our end of running our numbers for operational cost, it's our opinion that we're gonna take curbside out of the equation as it's really not part of that enterprise down there. So I just want to be clear on that. We're gonna treat curbside as a general fund cost. That's how it's been funded. So I just want that out there.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Uh,
I'll second.
consent agenda, nothing. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you all.